Hello everyone, this is Stefan Chandler Garcia, a developer advocate here at Salesforce. This is the second video in our series of Lightning Web Component Fundamentals, where we're going to continue talking about the API decorator and how we can use it to enhance parent-child component relationships and do some really cool things by exposing public properties and methods. If you haven't had a chance to check out the first video, you can find the link in the description below, where we talk about the anatomy of a JavaScript decorator and how it starts to apply to Salesforce. So let's go ahead and get started. Continuing on from the first API decorator video, we have our decorator child and our decorator parent components. Here in the decorator child component, I've made a few modifications. And you can see here that we currently just have our record ID property with our API decorator. And I've also written a method that allows us to navigate to a page. We'll talk more about navigation in a later video. Our parent component is just going to display a list of contacts that are passed into the child component. That way we can just display a nice card for each of those contacts. The first thing that we need to do is update that property to the name contact, because we no longer need that record ID, and we're just going to pass it in a contact. Then we're going to go over to our HTML file, and there we're going to reference that contact object directly in our markup so that we can display fields from that record, keeping in mind that this contact is going to be passed in from a parent component. As you can see, we just take our curly brackets and reference the object dot the field name. In this case, we'll just say email, and then we're going to go ahead and add in their mobile phone number, and we could say contact.mobile, and that will give us those field values within the component. Now, let's go ahead and open up the decorator parents JavaScript file. Here you can see that we're taking in the record ID from the page, and then just referencing a sample list of contact records that are stored into an array. We're going to use this array for building the component before we learn more about getting data from the server, which will be something that we cover later in this decorator series. The next thing we need to do is go into the component's HTML file and start by creating a template to iterate over the contact array. And for this, we're going to use a for each and then pass in our contacts. We're then going to give us an item name. In this case, we'll say it's just contact, and then supply an index so that we can reference the index inside of our iterator. Then inside of the iterator, we're going to first define a key for that iteration, and we're just going to say contact.I because that's what we've passed in as our index. And then we're going to reference our child component here, and we can just say c-decorator child. And then you'll see we can then reference our contact property because that's been exposed publicly, and then pass in the contact that's inside of the iterator. And inside of that tile, pass in that record and view the record in the context of that child component inside of this parent. And so the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and drag the component onto our record page, and go ahead and save that and go back into our org. And what you'll see here is we have our contact list on the account. And what it's doing is iterating over each of those contacts and passing them in through that public property into the child component and allowing you to display that data within the component itself. So back in our decorator child component, we have our navigate to page method. We're going to go ahead and pass in the record ID of the contact that's been passed in from the parent so that we can navigate to that record. And so over in our HTML, we're going to go ahead and add in a lightning button here, and we're going to give it a name and a label. We'll just say view contact. And then we're going to reference that method that we can click to navigate to that contact's record. Then once again, if we go back into Salesforce, you can see here we now have that view button on our card. We can click that and it will navigate to that contact record. So now let's take a look at how we can take that navigate to page method and make it public. The first thing we need to do is just add the API decorator to our method. And immediately that will expose that to any parent components. And so in our parent JavaScript file, I have a method called open all records that we're going to use to open all of the contact records that are inside of that component. And so the first thing we need to do is set up a constant for our child components, and we're going to write a query selector for that component. And we can just say c-decorator child. And that's going to query all of the node elements that contain those child components. We're then going to use a for each iterator so that we can loop through those components themselves. And then we can just say, okay, component dot our public method. And in this case, we're just going to say navigate to page. And literally, that's all you need to do is specify that method name, and you're calling the method on that child component. It's really cool and really easy to do. So now let's go ahead and go back into Salesforce and see how this works. So we now have an open records button in our card. We can click that, and it's going to go ahead and open all 3 of those records in the browser. So you can see here's the first contact that it's opened up, and it's also opened up 2 more additional tabs and opened them all in new tabs. This way we were able to meet that business requirement. And there we go. You can now see how we can do some really cool things by exposing public properties and methods to parent components from the children. I think it's really cool how you can call those methods that you've written on the specific child component and access them from the parent, and really opens up quite a few opportunities for you to innovate around the way that you're defining and designing your components. If you have any questions or feedback, please put it in the comments below, or feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at StefanWCG, or by email at stefan.garcia@salesforce.com. Thank you for watching this video on JavaScript Decorators. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe to the Salesforce Developers YouTube channel, and click on the bell icon so that you can get notified each time that we post a new video.